Do you guys remember Last Night in Soho? The Edgar Wright joint from a couple years ago? I feel like I never see people ever talk about this movie. I first saw this a few years ago when it released, and I managed to see it in theaters. I think it was like 2021 or something. So I think it was during pandemic year. Somehow I managed to see this in theaters. So that could be maybe part of why there wasn't a whole bunch of like initial chatter around this movie, is it released in a weird time. However, I remember really, really liking this movie. And then I kind of forgot about it. Then I was thinking about Anya Taylor-Joy the other day for no particular reason. And remembered this movie, and I was like, I should rewatch this. And I liked it, but I didn't love it, which was surprising to me, because I'm a huge Edgar Wright fan. I absolutely adore pretty much all of his movies. I think they're some of my favorite movies of all time. They're all like expertly constructed, very, very unique, super cool editing style. They're all really good. And then this one is good, but it didn't like blow me away. And I didn't like it more on rewatch, which is something that usually happens for Edgar Wright's other movies. They're typically so well constructed that like you start noticing more details, more like things that are set up early on, more ongoing jokes. Something like Scott Pilgrim, I didn't really love the first time I watched it, but as I kept rewatching it over the years, it started to become one of my all-time favorite movies. But I didn't really have that experience with this one. And so I'm trying to figure out why and what it is about this one that makes it like not a 10 out of 10 for me, which is like a crazy standard to have for a director. But it's still definitely curious, like why this one in particular I don't really ever hear talk about, and why I think it's a little bit weaker than its other movies. So Last Night in Soho, we're going to cover spoilers for this one, and probably some other Edgar Wright movies also, so there's your warning. I say go check it out. I like it. I think it's good. I think it's really unique. It has some great performances and some really good set pieces. Anyways, let's get into it. So Last Night in Soho is about a wannabe fashion designer who moves from her small town in Cornwall to the big city of London, particularly Soho, the neighborhood in London, to study fashion. And also she can see ghosts. And she ends up in this apartment where at night she starts seeing visions and is like transported back to London in the 60s. And we follow Anya Taylor-Joy's character, who is this wannabe singer who comes to the big city of London to try to make it. And she gets involved with Doctor Who, who's like, oh yeah, don't, girl, I can make your dreams come true. But then slowly, as she's like trying to get into the entertainment industry in London in the 60s, things become like darker and darker. And it's like not what she imagined. Eventually she ends up in this like burlesque show, and then that leads to her becoming a prostitute. And it keeps getting darker until eventually it gets into this like murder plot. The main character, Thomasin McKenzie, her character is like seeing these visions of what Anya Taylor-Joy experienced back in the 60s, because she could see ghosts or whatever. And so every night when she like goes to sleep, she dreams of this whole world of the 1960s London with Anya Taylor-Joy. And it's got kind of a Coraline vibe where she's like, at first it's like this like whimsical fun adventure that she's getting swept off to, but then like as it gets darker and darker, she's like, I don't want to go back to bed, I'm gonna have these crazy dreams. And then she starts seeing stuff during the day, and a lot of this stuff is shot in like really, really cool ways. There's all these like cool sequences of like London in the 60s with all this like fun 60s fashion and music and stuff. And the way that it's framed is like Thomasin McKenzie's character is like experiencing this like through Anya Taylor-Joy's eyes, kind of. And we see that she's like looking through the mirror, and like she looks back at her reflection and she's Anya Taylor-Joy. And then there's like this cool dance number where like Anya Taylor-Joy's dancing with Matt Smith, but then like the camera will like move slightly, and then suddenly it's Thomasin McKenzie, and they're like switching back and forth. It's a lot of like really cool switches, and a lot of it, some of it is like done through editing, but a lot of it is literally just them like ducking out of the view of the camera, and then the other actress like pops up on the other side. But it's done so quickly and so well that you don't really notice. Cool stuff like that. And then this whole plot line is like paralleled with Thomasin McKenzie's like going through her new fashion design school and like trying to fit in the big city with the college crowd, even though she's like from a small town and it's like kind of introverted and stuff. So it's this like coming of age horror movie, thriller, mystery, drama, kind of, and it's done in a very like Edgar Wright pseudo musical type of fashion that he did with like Baby Driver as well as Scott Pilgrim, where like there's music throughout the movie and a lot of it is like tied into what in a musical would just be musical numbers. There's like a lot of like dance sequences, for example, in this one, but the music is all diegetic, so it's all music that's actually happening in the world of the movie. And much like Baby Driver, there's a similar connection with the main character and her dead mom, who used to listen to all these old records, so she has like a fondness for all this like old 60s records. There's like a nostalgia angle. So there's a lot going on in this one, and I think all of the different pieces don't quite like fit all together very super well. However, I do appreciate this movie for like going for something very, very different. Like, as you probably could tell, it's a little bit difficult to even describe what this movie's about and like what genre it even fits into. So from that angle, I really appreciate this movie like going for something totally unique and trying something like totally different than Baby Driver or any of the Cornetto trilogy. However, I don't think it's quite executed as well as any of those other movies, and I don't think all the different pieces like quite fit together. The movie's also like going for a bunch of different things. There's kind of a bunch of different themes it's touching on. We have like this nostalgia angle where like the main girl is like very like nostalgic for the 60s, and she's like, oh man, I wish I could be in London in the 60s. That seems like the best time. But then like as she starts to experience that, she realizes that like, oh no, there was actually a lot of bad things that were happening in that time period, and stuff wasn't particularly good for women. Who would have guessed? So it's a like sort of be careful what you wish for, and like sort of the dark side of nostalgia, where like you may remember things being great and wonderful back in the day, but most days turns out as just as many bad things going on as the present day. So that's like an angle. There's like a whole thing about like trying to pretend to be someone else, because she starts to like emulate Anya Taylor-Joy's wardrobe and like hairstyle and stuff. She like doesn't like fit in with anyone else because she's like weird and introverted and can see ghosts, and like she's like a fashion designer, so maybe there's something there. Yeah, there's also this angle that feels like it should be more of a parallel, where like Anya Taylor-Joy wants to be a singer and Thomasin McKenzie wants to be a fashion designer, so they're both like coming to the big city to like get into the arts in some way. But then Anya Taylor-Joy's like path ends up going down this dark thing where she becomes a sex worker instead, and it's like, this is not at all what I wanted. And then like Thomasin is also like going down this dark path of like, this is not what I wanted, but hers isn't related to like the fashion design stuff. It's more just like because she's seeing ghosts and stuff. So I don't know if that quite fits. Like, it feels like Thomasin McKenzie's the main character doesn't really have like a huge arc in this movie, which is strange. And it also like feels like it doesn't really connect back to her like trauma with her dead mom. There's some stuff about mental health as well that they're like kind of touching on, with like the main character's mom killed herself, and so she has this like trauma and stuff. And so then she's also can see ghosts, but like everyone around her just thinks she's like fucking crazy. So, but like she can see ghosts because she sees stuff that like she would not know about the details of if it wasn't like a supernatural thing that was happening to her. So it's not like a real mental health thing that like a regular person can have. So I don't know, it's like weird. And then there's like a whole misogyny kind of angle, which again is like almost a complete theme. This one I feel like is kind of weird. Like this one I feel like doesn't quite work, where so like Anya Taylor-Joy's character is like involved with Matt Smith, but then Matt Smith turns out to be like not a great guy. She eventually like becomes a sex worker, and so she's like has dealings with all these like really creepy men. And then the big twist of the movie is that she ends up like killing all of them and like killing Matt Smith and stuff. Then some of this stuff is paralleled with Thomasin. Like she comes across a couple men who are creepy because, hey, misogyny's still around today. Maybe it's not necessarily as bad as it was in the 60s, but it's still not great now. But then it like sort of does this weird thing where, because Anya Taylor-Joy like did all the murders, and that's like what Thomasin learns, like her character ends up being the villain, like the twist villain kind of. And so like there's this part where she's getting like harassed by all the like different ghosts of the men that Anya Taylor-Joy has killed, but then we find out that they're like begging for like some type of vengeance and some type of like, oh, please kill her because we can't like rest until that happens or something. It's not entirely clear, but they do seem to be like less trying to attack Thomasin than we initially think. But like they are, you know, gross, creepy men and who had like power over Anya Taylor-Joy. So they're not really the heroes either. And like technically they're victims because they were murdered, but like I don't know. And the movie's not even totally super clear on this either, because there is like a line where she finds out the old lady that she's renting this apartment from is Anya Taylor-Joy, but all grown up. And then at the end of the movie, like she has a confrontation with her, and she's like, they all deserved it. And like Thomasin's like, yeah, I know, like I agree with you, they were shitty. So it's a little unclear on that level. Then like Thomasin has this storyline with this one of her classmates. Like she has a moment in a taxi early on where the cab driver is like kind of harassing her and being creepy, which is just like, you know, because men are like that sometimes. The world is shitty and sucks. So she's like standoffish towards like this one classmate who like is just genuinely trying to be nice and friendly to her, but it keeps coming off like she's unsure, she's hesitant to like receive any type of friendliness, any type of like genuine friendliness from her classmate because of like very like reasonable because of her past experiences with like men and creepy men and that kind of thing. But then it turns out that like he just genuinely is a nice guy who wants to be friends with her and wants to help her out. He becomes a love interest later on in the movie, and so like, you know, hashtag not all men or whatever, am I right? Then there's this other plot with Terrence Stamp, who's great, where he's this like creepy old guy who is a regular at the bar that she works at, and he just keeps saying like creepy like cryptic stuff that's vague. His performance is good. I'll give him that. This is like one of the things that like didn't quite work for me on rewatch. So like the twist with him is that Thomasin thinks that he is Matt Smith's character, and she thinks that he killed Anya Taylor-Joy. And so there's like this whole suspenseful sequence in the bar with him where she's trying to record him, and she's trying to get him to like confess that he killed Anya Taylor-Joy, but that's not what happened. That's not who this guy is, because it turns out Anya Taylor-Joy killed Matt Smith, and that was the murder that she had visions of. So Terrence Stamp is just a complete red herring, and turns out he actually used to be a cop who was like working in the like red light district and was trying to like crack down on the sex work and the stuff that was going on there. Like he was trying to get to the higher ups, like the pimps and stuff who were exploiting women. So he was a good guy all along, I guess. He just is very creepy for some reason, you know, like it's that kind of thing where it doesn't like that. It didn't quite work for me on rewatch, because like there's supposed to be this intense like sequence where she's trying to like get him to confess, and he's been really creepy to her and like kind of following her around and stuff. So we think that she's in like genuine danger the first time you watch it, but then on rewatch you're like, well, this isn't even the guy. So there's like, other than Terrence Stamp giving like a genuinely good performance, I think there just like isn't any tension on the second watch. And then he just like randomly gets hit by a car, and then they're like, oh no, that guy was a different guy. That wasn't the guy you thought he was. He's actually a cop and all that. He was Sam Claflin in the flashback. Okay, there's not really any clue to that. Also, I was like, that was the other thing, is I was like looking for something kind of like to set that up, and there wasn't really anything, at least nothing obvious that like set that up, unless he and like Sam Claflin had a similar line of dialogue at some point and I just missed it. Sam Claflin's like in one scene, so it's very reasonable to completely forget that he's even in the movie. And then he gets hit by a car, which is like set up earlier, but it does kind of come out of nowhere, and he looks pretty dead, but then he gets like hauled away from in an ambulance, so it's like maybe he survived, but then we never see or hear from him again. So that's that plot line. And there's stuff like that where like it feels like not all the different subplots like quite end up getting any kind of like big resolution, which is too bad, because I feel like Edgar Wright is actually usually pretty good at like resolving all of his subplots, or at least having them like come back in interesting and unsuspecting ways, or at least like keeping tabs on all the like various side characters in his movies. Like there's this whole other plot line with Thomason's like mean girl roommate who is just like mean and bitchy to the main character for like the whole movie, and then she also weirdly disappears from the movie after a certain point. Like there's a scene in the library where Thomason's like seeing ghosts and stuff, and she like tries to stab one of the ghosts, but then it turns out it's her bitchy roommate, and she doesn't end up stabbing her, but then like her ex-roommate like just freaks out and then runs away, and then we never see her again for the rest of the movie. And it's like, okay, in like a regular horror movie she would get like some type of comeuppance, or in like a traditional slasher she would get like killed early on and you'd be like, good, fuck that bitch. But in this movie she just like does like, she just kind of stops being in the movie after a certain point and doesn't get any kind of resolution or comeuppance or anything towards the end. So it just feels like another whole like plot line and character that ends up just we forgot about it and then moving on. I feel like I'm being too hard on this movie because I do think it is still very well made and interesting and unique. But I feel like it could have been even better with like another draft, or like with someone else taking a look at it and giving notes or something. I'm not sure. I think this movie also struggles like tonally and with like balancing the different genres it's playing with. Edgar Wright is like mostly known for comedies, and this, I think, is his least comedic movie of anything. Like, Baby Driver is not really a comedy, but it has a lot of, like, funny moments, and it has this, like, really fast-paced energy that works well for an action heist movie. But a horror movie, like, traditionally would need to be more, like, suspenseful and serious, you would think. But then, like, Edgar Wright did a zombie movie, and it's, like, very goofy, but also, like, a zombie movie. The horror is played like for laughs, but it's also played seriously. Like the characters get into these like terrible situations and you genuinely fear for them. At the same time, the characters are idiots and you're laughing at them for being idiots. Like, I feel like that's more the tone that fits Edgar Wright's directing style of like a horror comedy. Horror and comedy, which sound like two opposing genres, but actually I think they're way closer than most people realize. Any of Sam Raimi's Evil Dead movies are both horror and comedies, and it works beautifully. And that's, I feel like, the tone they should have strived for with this movie. I think it should have leaned harder into like the campy side of horror, because we're also like mixing horror sequences in with like kind of musical numbers, which could be a fun idea, but in this one I feel like it like kind of is in conflict with what the movie's trying to do. This movie also reminded me quite a bit of Baby Driver, Edgar Wright's previous movie before this, which fucking rules. So then I rewatched Baby Driver. What a fucking great movie. Oh, I don't really like how the light just gives me circle eyes. But I wanted to wear sunglasses for this video. Maybe if I angle it, if I go like that, if I go like this, there we go. I figured it out. Okay. Oh man, does Baby Driver fucking slap. One of my all-time favorite movies, and this is an Edgar Wright one that does get better with each viewing. Is it fair to compare these two? Probably not really. But it does a lot of things similar, and it does them in a way and in a world that like really like complements Edgar Wright's style. I feel like such a weird creep doing that. Okay, we're just gonna do that. Because Baby Driver is like an action movie, Edgar Wright's like fast-paced editing style really fucking makes this movie move. Of course, everyone's talking about how every sequence times with the music beautifully and just like insane ways. Like the scene where he gets coffee. How do you even fucking plan for something like that? There's so many like little details. I notice something new every time I watch that scene. It's so good. And it's all one take, or at least it looks like just one take. There's probably There might be 2 or 3 different takes in there, but still, it's next level shit. The Baby Driver cast is also just like so fucking good. Every single character is memorable and cool and played by like an incredible actor. We have obviously some like big names like Jamie Foxx and like John Hamm, and John Bernthal's in there. You got, I forget the actress's name, but the lady who plays Darling is really fucking good. And this is like, I feel like one of her kind of like breakout roles in a way, because she's been in a bunch of stuff like since then, and she's great. So like good recognition of talent, good job casting department. Same with Ansel Elgort and Lily James. I think they're both really great. Lily James is so fucking pretty, and they have great chemistry, and I like their romance a lot. This is one of the things that like didn't quite work for me on the first viewing, is because they fall in love like immediately. But it's something that I've come to really like and appreciate about this movie, and it's something that works for me more as I rewatch it, because like you start to realize that this is not exactly the real world that we're operating in. Everything seems to sync perfectly with music, not just stuff that Baby's doing, but like stuff that other people are doing also. So everything in this universe is just like heightened to a certain level. And love is also like a consistent force throughout this movie. It's paralleled perfectly with Buddy and Darling, John Hamm and what's her name, who have this like obnoxious, passionate romance where they're just like always making out, and it's annoying. They have matching his and hers tattoos, which is like something that a criminal romantic duo would think is cute, and it intentionally parallels Baby and Deborah. Buddy and Darling think of themselves as like a Bonnie and Clyde, which is exactly the path that Baby and Deborah could go down.
Get out!
Check out Bonnie and Clyde, yo. Like Bonnie and Bonnie.
And it's such a perfect like parallel to Baby as well, because like John Hamm throughout the movie is one of the only ones that like will defend Baby when everyone else on the crew is harassing him. He even shares Baby's love of music, which usually is something that's only shown for characters who are like moral and good. Apart from John Hamm, we have Deborah, we have Baby's foster dad who also likes music, and we have the like bank teller who mentions Dolly Parton, who turns out to be just a nice lady.
But you can't have a rainbow without a little rain. Wise lady.
So we were kind of like taken off guard by John Hamm, which is what makes him work so perfectly as the like twist final boss. The other big thing that like makes us not initially suspect John Hamm as the main antagonist is Jamie Foxx's Bats, who is just a fucking tour de force and chooses every scene that he's in, and he's just having so much fun, and he rules. He just goes on about how he's crazy and violent and like is constantly killing people that he doesn't need to, or trying to at least. He's like played off as super dangerous. He escalates every conflict that they come into, and you're like, surely this guy's the main bad guy. He's fucking nuts. His parents don't call him Bats for nothing. But no, he's not. He's almost entirely just a red herring. That's probably why he's wearing so much red. He's also just kind of a wild card. Every mission that Baby goes on has the potential of being his last. This world that he's in is dangerous, and any one of the characters that he meets could become the main villain. The stakes are like so high, there's this constant tension. The scene in the diner fucking rules. One of the things that's like really smart about this sequence is that Darling is giving this speech and she's talking to Bats, but then the way that it's edited, we suddenly are cutting between Baby and Buddy, who become the main hero and main villain of the final act. It's so fucking smart. This movie just fucking hits on every single level. Every character is great. Every character is memorable. Kevin Spacey is just like really good at playing a villain who has this creepy relationship with a younger boy who's like, he's kind of manipulating to be involved with him. I don't know why exactly, but for some reason, Kevin Spacey just feels like the perfect casting for that type of character. It's almost as if that type of role comes effortlessly to him. I don't know, just a coincidence, I guess. Anyways, one of the things that really made me think about Baby Driver, other than I just love that movie and I think about it all the time, but circling back to Last Night in Soho, the movie I was originally talking about, there's this scene that comes around the same point in the story between Thomasin McKenzie's character and Terrence Stamp, this guy who she thinks is the villain, but turns out to be a red herring. And it takes place at this bar, where in Baby Driver, there's a similar scene between him and John Hamm at the diner, and they have this like tense conversation. Baby's trying to figure out a way to get out of this situation. He's also trying to figure out if he can protect Deborah in a similar kind of way. Thomasin McKenzie's trying to figure out if she can not get killed. but also record this conversation and see if she can like trap him and get him to admit to the murder that she thinks he did. Except that in Last Night in Soho, Terrence Stamp is not the killer, so Thomasin McKenzie is actually not in any real danger in that scene. So the tension is kind of like gone on a rewatch. Where in Baby Driver, we have like what structurally feels like a similarly placed scene, except the tension is like always constantly there because John Hamm is the real villain and he is a killer and he will kill Baby if he gets the opportunity to. Like they even have a similar moment where John Hamm like starts listening to Baby's music and he's singing along to I'm Never Gonna Give You Up, and the song like syncs up with what's happening where he's like I will find you and I will kill you. In Last Night in Soho, Terrence Stamp is singing along to a song about Eloise, which I just remembered is the name of the main character in that movie. So he's like singing, so it sounds like he's singing to Eloise, the main character, but it's just like because he likes that song and she happens to have that name, and like he reminded her of that song or something. There isn't really like a serious tension to that because he's not actually the bad guy, you know? Like it doesn't quite work on the same level. Not that every movie should be exactly like Baby Driver. I appreciate Edgar Wright for trying something very different, but at the same time, like it feels like he's kind of trying to remake Baby Driver in some ways. At the very least, it's doing a lot of very similar things, but in a different genre where that doesn't really work, and without like leaning into the campiness of that genre. It feels like it like doesn't go far enough in the goofy side of things to like work on that level, and because it's like this mystery, it doesn't like work as well on rewatch. I don't know, it just feels like it could have used like another draft or something. Like Hot Fuzz, for example, also has like a mystery plot going through it, but it's still fun to rewatch because number one, there's a lot of like clues that you like start to pick up on and start to notice on your rewatch that are like, oh, that's clever that's set up. But also most of the different characters in the town and stuff have like ongoing jokes and running gags like associated with them. And it's a comedy, so it's like still really fun because there's like jokes all the time. And there's this like really fun relationship between Nick Frost and Simon Pegg, as always. That element keeps you invested. Last Night in Soho isn't really a comedy. There's some like jokes in it and there's some comedic moments, but it doesn't really have that same rewatchability because a lot of the tension is gone after you know the mystery. So I don't know. Last Night in Soho is still very good. Anything with Anya Taylor-Joy in it is probably going to be a recommend for me. But I feel like what is a good movie could have been a great movie with like something else, and I'm not quite sure what that is. Also, I just really wanted to talk about Baby Driver because I love it. Anyways, that's it for this time. Thank you for watching. Make sure to subscribe and all that. I'm going to go listen to the Baby Driver soundtrack and do donuts in the parking lot. See ya.